with the management team, because that's where I spend a lot of my time, is like, what is realistic? There is one thing being ambitious and there's one thing being foolish. Absolutely.
Very good point.
Exactly. And, if the company is being ambitious, yes, but they are being, completely ambitious coming from a foolish aspect, well, there is very little that you can do. And then you see that, distilling it through in the culture.
So, hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Overdrive Digital Podcast. As always, please do check us out on SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, we're in all the usual places. If you enjoy this episode, please do subscribe, go and check out the past episodes, give us a share, always hugely appreciated to get your digital love on that front. So for this episode, I'm with CMO On Demand, Growth Marketing Specialist, Mehul Garg from Be Gargantuan. Hello, Mehul.
Hi, John. Hi. Thanks for the great introduction, by the way. I'm humbled. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, no, it's a pleasure. And we've worked together for probably a few years across various different projects now, and kind of really looking forward to doing this episode and diving into your experience.
I hope I can do justice to your listeners for giving us their time. It's my first podcast, so yeah, I hope I can add value.
Oh, well, there's an honor for me there as well. So we're going to be talking about your work as a CMO on demand, as you put it, and marketing in general, and some of the kind of catches around it. Really interested in the implementation side. Before we go into that, do you want to just give a very brief overview of your background and how you ended up specializing in this area?
Sure. I think let me start by saying that I'm actually not challenging anyone in the high stakes. So not doing anything groundbreaking. I am somebody like all of us, who have happened to be in D2C businesses for over a decade, doing big as well as small things, and over a period of time specializing in e-commerce and m-commerce. What has happened is, because I started my career as a marketing assistant and grew into CMO, that allowed me to be at the heart of the detail as well as oversee the bigger picture, and reboot the brands from the inside out, businesses from the inside out. So what has happened, John, there is, it has given me a point of view, and this is my own core belief, really, that any business, in order to be profitable, long-term and sustainable, you need more than a great product. You need more than a great marketing campaign, and more importantly, you need more than just a growth hack.
Yes.
Yeah, basically, you need. Now you'll ask, what do you need? You need a holistic thinking, really. And what I have found, especially over the last 2 years, working with all these different businesses through my consultancies, I've come up with these 3 key principles, which have time and again have remained relevant, is context, relevance, and focus. So whatever holistic thinking you're coming up with, you can see it through the lenses of these 3 key principles in terms of contextual, is it relevant, and how focused are you? So this is my background and how I see the world. In terms of you said, how did I get into it? So basically, again, a continuous desire and also a fear, I guess, that all of us have, that how can we be relevant how can we remain relevant as marketeers?
Yep.
So I had that, and I'm always looking and reading things and developing myself. So I came across, I think it was July 2018. When I was a CMO at TouchNote. So I came across this Reforge alumni, which was then created by Andrew Chen and Brand Balfair. They both are the most celebrated growth marketeers of our generation. And they created this Reforge growth course. So I was the first cohort to participate in that. And that's where I was introduced to this concept of growth marketing.
Got you. And it's interesting you mentioned that you're not trying to do anything particularly groundbreaking. You've got kind of core focus areas, and I think the word growth hack, I'm really not a fan of it, right? Because it insinuates that there's a silver bullet or a quick win or a hack that will get you to where you want to be. Whereas what we're talking about here is long-term sustainable growth. So what is we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but what's your view on, or definition of growth marketing? And What are we actually talking about here, Mehul?
Actually, it's good that you're asking that question, because right now, I see a lot of people. Again, like anything, it's so misunderstood. So the way I see, I mean, sure, Andrew Chen and Brand Belfast and everybody will have their own definition of growth marketing. But what I see growth marketing is as it's very quantitative. It's about scientific modeling. You growth marketeers answer questions, a lot of A/B testing, a lot of landing page optimizations. Viral factor, K factor. Virality is one of the words that they use quite a lot. But if I were to put it into, again, context, so the way I see growth marketing as, it is fantastic tool to create a tangible value. Whereas in marketing as we know it, it is an amazing principle or discipline to create intangible value. And value is all about perception. So what growth marketing does is it creates tangible value. And this is where, it is much more quantifiable. Marketing in general, of course, it creates tangible value, but it more efficiently creates intangible value. And for me, it is not, because I hear a lot from the teams, oh, we have got rid of VP of marketing. Growth hacker is the new VP of marketing. You see all those things.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I call this bullshit, to be honest, because, it is all about still in the round. There is a role of growth marketing because absolutely it's quantifiable. It helps you create the tangible value, but it needs to be in the context of overall marketing. And when I say context, it's very important for businesses because, for example, growth marketing has come from the likes of, LinkedIn, Dropbox, Uber. They're very product-centric organizations. They've had existing demand already in the market. So I believe growth marketing assumes that there is a natural demand, and it uses super platforms like Facebook or Instagram, basically all these super platforms which has billions and billions of people, and they use these platforms through integrations and distribute their network. Now, that's not relevant for an e-commerce marketeer who have got other FMCG products to sell. I mean, Apple is a great example. Apple doesn't talk much about growth marketing. Again, I may not have heard them, but they still talk about, creating that intangible value.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's understanding. So I'm creating. So the best way to think about it is growth marketing is about creating tangible value. Marketing is about creating intangible value. And as marketeers, it is up to us how we use these two disciplines.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, they have to work together.
Absolutely. They are not enemies. They are pitted against each other, but they are not.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I mean, we've worked together over a number of years now on various projects formally and kind of, I guess, chatted socially about them as well. And
yeah.
Like you've worked in a fair number of organizations within your role as a CMO on demand, as we're putting it, right? So when you parachute into an organization, there's an ambition for growth. There's, a big growth target. There's a certain amount of time that needs to be achieved in.
Yeah.
There must be so many things to look at and think about. Like, where do you start?
Yes. I think that's $1 million question in terms of where do you start, because there's always, you're absolutely right. I'm expected to have the answers and deliver value from the first hour that I join any project. That's the pressure I have to deal with. But I've become better, and I think I've kind of find a way in terms of which works certainly for me is because now when I'm talking to people, the brands that I'm working with, I say that allow me the first few weeks to at least get my head around in terms of the thinking. So the way I start is but of course, different projects will have different objectives and they will require different strategies.
Sure.
But this one formula I can say that works, and I've seen it working, is start with audit. I have a good understanding of the overall high level understanding of the business. So you can go through the board decks, investor decks, business strategy, all hands, whatever the strategic decks that they give you, you can just start with that, where you develop a top level understanding of the business. You can apply the same thing to the marketing, understand their weekly reports, their monthly reports, their cadence, wherever you need to do their social media strategy, their performance strategy. But basically start with that to give you a high level understanding, and do deep dives as and when where required. And I schedule lots of So what I do is I also schedule a lots of informal chats with key stakeholders, CEO, founders, heads of, if I can get access to the customers. But this is where I start. I start with a comprehensive audit. And what it does is, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like,
Yeah,
have you ever got to that point where you've done your first initial investigation, you've
yeah,
audited the business, you've
yeah.
audited current marketing activity, and you've gone, this just isn't going to happen? Like, is there a process on your side as a
Yeah.
consultant where you have to make sure that the opportunity exists or that the results are possible? Like, have you ever got to that point before where you've
Well,
oh,
that's an interesting one. I think this is managing the, now this is where experience comes in handy, because this is before even I enter into the project. I focus more on the process. Like, this is the process and this is the outcome. So I make it very essential that yes, these are your objectives. I'll do this quick audit. And I mean, a recent example, I did a project for Echo, which is an online digital pharmacy app. Right
okay,
now, yeah, so they've done really well, and they're acquired by Lloyd's Pharmacy. We're a part of them now. So I did, I was talking to the Stephen, who is the of co-founder, and Benoit, who is the CEO. I was introduced to them, and we were talking about a 4-week project. And I said, okay, guys, let's do one thing. I just need 7 days. Let me do this audit. And after the audit, I can deliver this. And from that delivery project, we can then decide how the implementation, or we can move forward from there. But unless I do an audit of the business, I will not be able to give you a better idea. So again, you can manage that. You have to manage those expectations up front.
sure,
And as I said, audit doesn't have to be deep dive. You can keep it high level. You can do it within 7 to 10 days. And suddenly businesses then become open-minded that, okay, you know what? Actually, it's not weeks and weeks he's asking. He's only asking for 7 to 10 days. And, with that audit, it gives me so many valuable insights from people perspective, strategy perspective, are they ready or not, operational perspective,
yep.
and so that really informs the so-called the strategy and the direction going forward.
So there's a very clear initial stage from your point of view where you are assessing whether there is demand, whether or not the organization is ready in itself to grow.
Absolutely, because I mean, I'm a firm believer of, I spend 80% of my time making sure I'm asking the right question. And I've written about that also, as art of asking the right question, because we are in an information age. The answers is pouring out of our ears, and it's so easy to jump on the answer. But it is very important to spend time in making sure you're asking the right question, framing the question, and then by the time you've finished asking the right question and framing the question, 9 times out of the time, the answer is already in front of you. So you don't
Yeah.
have to invest that much time in the answer.
Yeah, there's definitely a skill, I think. Well, obviously, a very big skill in that early stage fact finding phase, I think.
Yeah.
So, can we talk about people a little bit? I mean, having the right people in place, having the right team in place must be a huge factor in a company or a business's ability to grow quickly. Like, what
Yeah.
are you looking for when you arrive at an organization from a people perspective?
It's interesting. I mean, it's such a loaded question. I would still, again, I go back to my point that I raised before, which is where I really like this new so-called, okay, I'm blowing my own trumpet here a little. This framework that I've created about context, relevance, and focus.
Sure.
Most people are good. And from a technical aspect, yes, getting the right people in place is important. Technically, you can pretty much test people through case studies, through quantitative basically the exercises during the interview process. In my experience, where people recruitment falls down is the cultural and the fit aspect of it, or it is the expectations that do not get managed. So
Sure.
before even thinking about people or team structures, again, I think as leaders, or as founders, basically, who you are recruiting, you need to have a clear understanding of what is it that you're expecting from that team. What is it that you're expecting of those people, why the team is being created, what will be the success metrics of those teams. Because the more answers you can give to yourself, and then with that in mind, you look for people or you build a team, that becomes really relatively easier. Again, of course, you will have failure rate in this, but you minimize your failure rate by answering those questions upfront. Not only that I need a performance manager, because there are so many out there, and a lot of them are good. They are really good performance managers. But in terms of what is kind of mindset I need from that performance manager? What are my expectations? Do I need a standard performance manager, or do I need somebody who can grow into this role? Do I need somebody who comes with a playbook, or do I need somebody who's open to recreate a playbook? So answering those qualitative questions and having an idea allows you to bring the right people and create the right environment.
Yeah, and I guess when you're under pressure to deliver big results in
Yeah.
amount of time, a short amount of time,
Yeah.
how quickly do you need to take action in terms of if you haven't got the right people? Like, is that one of the first things you need to deal with, or?
So see, the way I look at it, because again, the whole right people in the team structure. I mean, we can have another podcast. So I do not know 10
Yeah.
podcasts on that. I mean, the simple way, and this is a new thinking that I have adopted recently, is that if I look at marketing team, I've created 3 blocks of it. I call it front end, back end, and integrators. Pretty much, I've stolen this concept from the product world. Front end are the people who distribute. So your performance marketeers, PR people, influencers, all those channel distributors will come in that. Your backend are the people which are data people, creators, I don't know, but all the support function, your data scientists, project managers, they will go in the backend. Integrators are your brand people, and that's where expert agencies come in from me that integrate. They're integral in joining front end as well as the back end. So when I look at this structure and when I go into a company, I can assess where we are lacking. Is it the front end? Is it the integrators, or it is the back end? And depending on where, mostly the backend is more or less there. Sometimes it's not there, but you can get away with little backend functionality, which is they usually have a data person, they usually have a creation person in the creation team there, data scientists and project managers. If the front end part is a little bit light in terms of distributors, this is where I personally bring in expert agencies in to drive those results quickly. Mm-hmm. But having this structure just allows me, okay, what is it that you could be, what is it that can be delivered? And ultimately, I will still go back to having those communications, managing upwards. You got to have honest, transparent communications with the management team, because that's where I spend a lot of my time is like, what is realistic? There is one thing being ambitious and there's one thing being foolish. Absolutely.
Very good point.
Exactly. And if the company is being ambitious, yes, but they are being completely ambitious coming from a foolish aspect, well, there is very little that you can do, and then you see that distilling it through in the culture.
And how are you judging that? So it can be very difficult, particularly within a new business, to understand where the line is between a growth target that is ambitious and a growth target that is just completely unrealistic. Like, how do you, like, where?
It actually comes from the people, and again, I think it's the experience. Now I've seen what good looks like. I've had my fair share of troubles and challenges so I think it becomes comes relatively easier because of the experience.
Yeah.
Because when you look at the numbers, but for somebody who's not got the experience, the simplest way is look at the current run rate. Look at the structure of the team. Look at what you're doing, and then just look at the target. If the company is continuously missing its target, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
There is something absolutely wrong in that. And I see targets are arbitrary for me. There is no point having moonshot goals if you can never achieve them, because that demoralizes the team. So have ambitious yet realistic targets, because so that you can really drive the team.
Yeah, and I guess if you've got the luxury of past performance data, that's a really good way to kind of work out whether or not the targets are on trend, how
Well,
far off
even
trend
if
they
you
are.
don't have past performance data, simple thing is, if even if whenever I'm going in green businesses also, and when I look at the targets, I just basically ignore the targets, because until unless you've got, you can set the targets you want to. As I said, they all are arbitrary. So until unless you really start looking at the traction, if there is a real, if even if you haven't got too much of past performance data, but if even there is no roadmap of, okay, how we will get a first 100,000 customers, we do not know what channels will be working, and you have all these targets, I would say, I personally ignore them, because the targets do not matter. What really matters is how quickly you can get the traction, how quickly you can learn, and how quickly you can build on what you're doing.
That's very interesting, and kind of goes on to the next point that I really wanted to dive into, which is around implementation and really kind of making things happen quickly, because I think so many people can write a plan. And
Yes.
there's obviously a big skill and there's a
Yeah.
lot of knowledge involved in writing a good plan. However, I think there are fewer people definitely that can get a plan moving quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
My experience of working with you is that you definitely get things moving quickly. One way or another, stuff happens, right? So,
Yeah.
like, what, I guess, like, do you find that that's a struggle in some businesses, or like, how do you approach that? Because,
I think it's people. So of course, I mean, the implementation is hot. So actually, yeah, the way I see it. So this is where the whole term of T-shaped, CMO or T-shaped marketeers are coming in. I call myself also a T-shaped, where you're very good with planning, but equally you're good with implementation and execution also. Because most of the time, what you see is people who are either good in strategy and planning, or people who are good in execution and implementation.
yeah,
And that's where things fall, because
I guess
most of them,
they're quite different skill sets, though, aren't they?
they are very different skill sets, and therefore things but nowadays new breed marketers, so because I'm on demand, and I am, as I said, because I have to deliver value from the first hour I joined the company, and implementation is very easy. Jumping straight into implementation is very tempting. It's easy to justify. You get this sense of illusion that you're doing something, you are contributing, and it's so easily just justifiable that, okay, you're implementing, you've done this, but what I say is, I mean, this is, maybe I'll be giving you a counterintuitive here answer. I still will take back, in terms of the biggest barrier of implementing is not having a proper planning, not having a focus, and not having the ongoing guidance that your team needs. In terms of, these are the biggest barriers, because what happens, as I said, it becomes intuitive to just jump into straight implementation. The amount of times I join a business and they expect me to jump into implementation is like, guys, we can jump into implementation, we can implement, lose the focus, and that very thing will become the very barrier, because we will have lack of resources, conflicting, deadlines, and resource and burnout, and then we won't be able to implement. So I would say, still start from having that effective plan, and then have a clear ownership. So this is one thing, the way you can do it is have those clear ownership. Who is planning, who is implementing? The planner cannot be putting too much time into implementing, because then you're not helping your team to come up with a focus to guide them to on through their implementation. There are frameworks there. You have OKRs, which is a great framework to help your team continue, really, disciplined in terms of this implementation. I've created my own framework with my team, where it's a weekly team meeting that happens, and then I rank them in BAU, projects, and growth. So there are three categories: BAU, projects, and growth, and they have to put their time, put 40% of the time what they're spending in. So that gives me a kind of a regular understanding. Okay, how much time they're spending in implementation, what needs implementing, and how much time they're spending in thinking and planning.
Yeah.
And then, of course, having the basic project management skills. So what I try, and this is the hardest sell, is if I can, I send my team to have some basic project management skills, because it is a structured approach. It gives them an appreciation. Of course, you don't want to become an expert prince to project managers, but they have an appreciation of how to take from a project from initiation through to the completion and ongoing. And then, of course, you've got these basic tools like Basecamp, Asana, Gantt charts. But
Yeah.
what happens is companies skip all the above and directly think the more tools they have, the better they will be at implementing.
Yeah. I think it's a common trap, isn't it? And so you're very kind of, it sounds like it's a very carefully thought through approach to that balance between planning and implementation, and not sacrificing one over the other.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, it's, it is 80-20. I am a firm believer of 80-20. Implement 20% of, the things that will drive 80% of the value.
Yeah.
And of course, it's a Pareto law, but and 80-20, it doesn't work out 80-20. Maybe it works out 60-40. And this is where planning, focused planning becomes much more important. Is it because we always have limited resources, limited time, limited budget, everything is limited. That's given. So spend some time in terms of, okay, what are those 2 or 3 projects that we will want to implement that will drive 80% of the value? And as a CMO or as a leader, this is where you have clear ownership, because as a leader, you can't get sucked up into implementation, because then your other managers will stop implementing because they need your guidance. So it is a balance where you do the plan, you step down in implementation, you come back up. So it's like traveling 1,000 and 100 feet as well as 10,000 feet many times a day.
Yeah, I can
And
imagine.
and that's where people fail, because they either, most of the time, people either are in one camp or the other camp, rather than being able to shift between the two.
Yeah, no, I can well imagine that being quite a difficult balance to strike. And so over time, like when we have worked together, we've been kind of coming in on the paid social side.
Yes.
I guess this almost comes back to how you're setting targets and your approach, and I guess the general attitude to targets initially. But how should people budget for their media spend when there's a big growth target in place? Perhaps there isn't any past performance data to understand what a CPA should be or a ROAS should be.
Yeah.
What's your approach? Because going in aggressively is a bold move when there isn't any proven formula.
Absolutely. Yeah. Interesting question. I think the textbook answer, if I were to give you, would be go as aggressive as your unit economics allows. But then the question is, actually, I do not know what my unit economics are. For me, this is something that I've come across. There will be a lot of textbook answers that you would come across, that spend 70% on your performance campaign, 30% on your brand, or if you're DR driven, then maybe, or if you're brand driven, do 60-40. You will have lots and lots of answers out there. And again, it's so contextual. The way I would look at is, looking at the structure of the budget and how the marketing budget is structured. By what that I mean is, the very simple thing: you have spend and then you have investment. Most common practice is putting entire marketing budget under ROI as the metric. And then that limits your ability to test, learn, growth, trying out new approaches, because you always have this ROI dagger in front of you.
Yeah.
And that really limits. So the way to get around that is have very 2 clear categories: spend, which is where you have your ROI and hard metrics, whatever that is, CAC, ROI, CPR, whatever that is. And then have investment, which is where you have more soft metrics. Now, this is where I think, as marketeers, and especially people who are in my position, we need to challenge that to the VCs, because VCs themselves invest in a portfolio. They don't expect every investment to return a yield, and they apply those average returns. The same thing is in the marketing. You have spend as a category, you have investment as a category. Within spend, you have your proven channels. Within investment, you have your trial period. Your brand, perhaps the channels that you're testing. And as the learnings become mature, you move them from investment into the spend category.
Right.
So, and then, so this is the way I would personally approach it in terms of.
How do you have that conversation? So let's say you're in a position where the board are a little bit over cautious with spend, and you're looking at the budget and going, look, this just isn't going to happen. How do you approach that conversation? How should people kind of go about getting buy-in for an appropriate budget when what they've been given just isn't enough?
Well, brace it I would say, just brace yourselves, because it's going to be a long ride. Doesn't happen overnight, doesn't happen in a few months. It could take years to shift that. And that's the challenging part of it. You just have to brace it, that you will not be able to convince them. into a meeting, you will be at the, at the risk of sounding like a broken record. You will have to continue maintaining that narrative and then show. So I would say, again, before even having those conversations, the issue is, as marketeers, we accept it. We don't even challenge it. So before even having those conversations, coming up with this spend and investment or whatever works for you, you think that, what is it that I need to do? So you start having those conversations with you. Then you start having conversations with your peers within the industry. You start socializing this idea. And of course, then you see, so I've been, there have been so many examples, whereas like guys, if there's a limit on CAC, I mean, you and I, we have had so many discussions that, okay, if this is a limit on CAC, this is the limit on growth. From example, prospecting campaigns, they require a certain different metric as compared to conversion campaigns. So I think, start socializing the idea, understand the mindset of where investors are coming, and use the data points that you've got. So for example, you can still do a bit of a testing, like we did it at Live Better Way, where we did testing. And with testing, we had this, and it required smaller budget, and we provided this proof of concept that actually, if we invest this much money in prospecting, it effectively drives the conversion funnel at a later date. So you can still break it down, because ultimately people want to grow. Even the investors want to grow. It's just, how do you navigate that? You navigate that through socializing. You navigate that through providing them qualitative data, and you navigate that by providing quantitative data. So attacking it from every angle, but keeping in mind it could take long time.
Yeah, so you've got to be ready for that.
You got to be
mentally.
persistent, stubborn. Just keep going for it.
Brilliant. And to close up, because this has been a fascinating chat, like, what have you got, any career highlights where you've gone in, it's you've gone, oh my goodness, this is a huge challenge, and you come out the other end winning? Like, what's your highlight? There must be many.
There are. My career highlights have been, they have been the one where I've learned the most, actually. They have been the most challenging. I don't have any hair, I guess that's why, anymore. They have been the most challenging, but I've learned the most. Amazing people, shared goals, mutual respect, all those things. I know I'm sounding esoteric, actually, and I think this is where I would like to give this answer. So, I mean, whether it's scaling Photobox, making TV success, or rebranding and repositioning TouchNote completely, and then successfully launching it into the US, or having an opportunity to meet Sheryl Sandberg, because when I was an on-demand CMO,
wow.
That's my claim to fame. But when I was an on-demand CMO at 8Fit, we were the biggest spenders on Instagram, 2 million a month or something like that. A fitness app it is, in Berlin-based company. So I think, there's many career highlights, but what really is a common thread among them is, and I think hopefully this could be a value to your listeners, is, don't be afraid of holding your view and your own voice. Have your own point of view. Listen to your critics, which there are many. If only I had a penny for my critics, I would be a multimillionaire by now. Listen to your critics, listen to your industry experts, but then bring it back to you. Apply your own learnings and navigate. Because, John, there's so many stats, but we spend about 80% of the time on our workplace, right? I personally believe that these highlights which have happened with me, they have made me not only a better professional, that's given, but a better human being. It's made me a better version of ourselves. And actually, the better human being we become, the more aware we become. And the more aware we become, the more effective we become in our professional life. I know
it's such a great point to end on, though. I love that point about, get your point of view, stick to it,
and
but
of course be aware, and of course you will not get it 100% right, or 10, you may get it 6 times out of 10 right, but you learn. Once, if you don't put yourself out there, if you don't put your voice out there, you will not know.
You've got to be in it to win it.
Exactly.
Excellent stuff. And just before we go, where can people find out a little bit more about you and who you are and what you're doing?
Well, you can link me in, so Mehul Garg, or my website, which is begargantuan.com.
Fantastic.
Gargantuan is the word huge, so begargantuan.com.
Brilliant stuff. Well, we'll pop those links in the post as well so everyone can find you. And look, thanks so much for taking the time this morning. Good luck with everything, and I'm sure we will catch up soon.
My pleasure, John. My pleasure. Hope it has been of some value to you and your listeners. So, yeah.
Oh, it absolutely would have been. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.